Hello everybody, we're out here today at Wozupi Tribal Gardens and I'm here with Matt Smouse. He is the agricultural supervisor of this farm and we have a few questions that we're curious about. So thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
One of the things that we were curious about are, you guys are an organic farm, so what are some of the differences between organic farming and more large-scale commercial factory farms?
Sure. Well, we're an organic vegetable farm, and we're a small-scale organic vegetable farm. So there's a lot of differences between organic farms as well, both in scale and what they produce. But the major thing that defines organic agriculture is that it aspires to produce food in a way that is not harmful to the environment or to human health, and that stewards the environmental resources such as soil, and honors local wildlife, that sort of thing, for generations to come. It's sort of predates the term sustainability, but really sort of helps define the notion for a lot of people, I think. Mm-hmm. And it grew out of a movement sort of started by consumers in the 70s, 80s, probably as far back as the 60s. Organic gardening goes back as far as the 30s, 40s, and 50s, but and it became really big in the 90s. When people started to get really concerned about some of these issues. So an organic farm is allowed to use certain sprays for pests, but only if it is very warranted, not as just sort of a default all the time sort of thing. And those sprays have to undergo a pretty rigorous approval process. So they have to be, generally they try to be naturally derived, relatively benign, so if it's designed for a certain insect pest, it's supposed to only attack that insect pest and not others in the environment. These are all ambitions and goals. They don't always work out that way, and it's not perfect. Nothing is perfect. But we also use a lot of actual exclusion, like nets, covers, blankets to keep pests out. All the amendments and fertilizers to soils also have to be, or are supposed to be mostly naturally derived, unless the naturally derived source is too difficult, too ineffective, or very rare. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of soil care and soil erosion, there's a big emphasis often placed on cover crops, on minimizing tillage, which disrupts the soil structure, on attending to soil life and soil biology. But there's all these organic practices that vary between farms. And then there is the realm of organic agriculture as like an actual USDA certification category, and that really defines the constraints, and those are enforced by states a little differently.
So one of the things that we're curious about is what you guys grow here. Do you mind showing us some of the things that you've got started?
Yeah, well, we start a lot more in the greenhouse here than a lot of farms do. We do that for a number of reasons. It gives us season extensions. So by the time it's warm enough to plant outside, we're not planting a seed, we're planting a plant. And for something like a tomato, that may be an 8-week-old plant, and as you can imagine, that's a real jump on the season. But even with some things that most people would direct seed outside, such as lettuces, we start in here because that gives us a 4-week jump on the season. So that's one reason we plant in here. We also do it because on a small farm, every square inch or square foot is very, very precious. You know, you can't have a poor stand. So to ensure really solid stands of produce, we start a lot of stuff in here so we can plant out and get exactly the density on the bed that we want of the plant.
So what do you got in these
So these are actually these are fun. These are herb pots. So these actually go to our TSA members. Now TSA is Tribally Supported Agriculture. I suppose we should talk about the markets at some point. And the members receive a weekly box of produce. And in their first summer box, because we also have a spring session which is already going, in their first summer box they will get this herb pot. And properly pruned and maintained, this will give them 5 kinds of herbs that they can pick from on their porch or patio. They can pot them up if they want a bigger space. We have sage, rosemary, thyme, no, that's oregano, chives, and basil. So that's what these are. And coming down here, we have peppers and tomatoes, which go in our high tunnels. So we do grow some peppers outside under the elements. We grow some of them and all of our tomatoes inside under the protection of our plastic structures.
Are these spicy peppers or
we do
like
some,
the big bell peppers?
Sweet peppers. So they're mostly big bells, but we have different colored bells in here, the orange, the yellow, the red. Some heirloom varieties that are very sweet and cool, different shapes. And then we do some hot peppers as well.
Okay.
Yep, but we do mostly the sweet. And it's all based on what your customers want, you know? So that seems to be what's most popular with our customers. These tomatoes, an 8-week-old plant, pop it out of its cell here, perfect root system, rough it up a little bit, bury it in the ground. We can get a jump. We get the 8 weeks of the age of the plant, plus we can get started 2 to 3 weeks earlier than usual, even in an unheated high tunnel.
So you started those tomato plants from seeds 8 weeks ago.
Yep, that's right. And so we can get almost a 3-month lead on the season when we start them early and we plant them in protected structures. And we do a lot of tomatoes. And then over here you see kind of a broader selection of things. And mostly, without emphasizing the different stuff here, I would say you can see what diversity we grow. There's a little of everything. And we are a highly diverse farm. We grow 50 plus crops, basically. I think maybe 50 to 70 varieties of 30 to 40 crops.
Wow.
Everything from broccoli to zucchini to sugar snap peas to lettuces to baby greens to tomatoes to peppers, you know, to cucumbers, all that stuff.
A lot of stuff, wow.
And most of it we start in here, including things like beans that most people would seed directly. But this gives us, if you want to zoom in on one of these beans, these are pretty fun to watch open. These give us a 2-week jump on the season for beans.
Wow.
And then we even do microgreens here. So these are just grown in the tunnel and will be cut when they're very little, you know, and packaged out as little teeny baby greens.
Well, should we go out to the field and take a look around? One of the questions we have is, how do you prepare the beds and how do you grow your crops and make sure things are weed free without using chemicals?
Yeah, all right. Well, preparing the beds is done with small scale machinery. And either that's a small 2-wheel tractor that basically is like a glorified rototiller, and you can attach different implements to it. And that allows us to get into the fields multiple times a day or a week without worrying so much about the soil moisture level, because it doesn't compact things like a tractor does. So it's a lighter weight piece of equipment that can nonetheless make very nice raised beds. And we work with a raised bed here because we have sort of a heavy soil and it's really nice to have the additional drainage. And you can see sort of the shape under the plastic here, and I'll talk about the plastic in a sec, but basically there's a furrow or a path, and that's where we walk, and then there's a bed. And our pattern is the furrows and paths are about 18 to 24 inches wide, and the bed's about 3 to 3.5 feet wide. And there's a couple different implements we use to make those beds. And in the process of making the beds, we add amendments. So that includes compost, it includes fertilizers, and it includes mineral amendments to balance the soil. We add a lot of those only once per year, and then we'll add a little bit of extra fertility every time we flip over a bed to crops. Some of these beds will see 3 or even 4 crops a year. Others will see only 1 crop, and then ideally some are just put into cover crop for whole years as well. Another mulch we use on the farm in sort of a limited way is straw. We order in it's not organic, it's hard to find organic straw, but it's straw that's certified not treated with any chemicals. And that is a natural mulch that does provide carbon for the soil life. It provides cover for the soil. It provides cover for the earthworms to work, keeps the soil damp, and does provide some fertility over time. And it breathes, obviously, lets water in and out. So that's really nice. And for our garlic, we plant our garlic in the fall, and usually around late October, and it overwinters. It gets a little root on before the snow comes, and then in the spring it's ready to pop because it's already got those roots in the ground. So this is a lot of growth. Most of this growth has come on within the last about 3 to 4 weeks. So it's really amazing how fast it grows.
Okay. So do you mind telling us a little bit about these high tunnels behind us and how you use those?
Absolutely, yeah. So these are a very important part of a small farm. Called high tunnels or hoop houses. Ours have generally not even been heated, and yet they provide a tremendous number of benefits. And we will be heating these at some point, which provides even more benefit. But even unheated, what they basically do is they extend our season by several weeks to several months on either side of the spring and the fall frost dates. And it allows us to get a real jump start, especially on greens in the spring. And it allows us to get a jump start on tomatoes for summer. And then once those things are growing, we tend to ventilate them, and they're no longer used so much for trapping heat, but they're used for keeping the rain off. And keeping the rain off does a lot as well. Tomatoes, certain other crops are very susceptible to disease under too much dampness. And this keeps the water off of the foliage and creates more of like a Mediterranean type climate or a subtropical climate, which is where a lot of these plants are from.
Okay.
So This is very valuable real estate. We absolutely pack them to the brim every week of the year that we can. We often have things growing next to other things until those things get so big and the other things come out. So it's a real dance in here. And between these 3 and 1 in the back, we've got about a quarter acre. Yep, about a little over a quarter acre under plastic protection.
Wow.
And we grow in the soil. It's not hydroponic, and we do water, but we can control the water. And that quarter acre is probably as productive as an acre in the fields.
Wow.
Not only just in the amount of time we can grow in there and the quality of the product and the yields, but also just in yield with things like tomatoes. They're just bumping. So we just got some of our tomatoes planted. We've been growing greens and stuff for a couple months already, and I can show you some of that stuff.
Yeah. Should we go take a look?
Absolutely. So this is the tunnel that we've been growing greens in and greens only, and it's a real pretty tunnel.
Ah. Let's go in. So these plants are like lettuce, right?
Yep, this is lettuces for a baby salad mix, and this bed has already been harvested twice. And we got a total of about 120 or 130 pounds off of this bed.
So you can harvest this same plant more than one time.
That's right. At a certain point, it starts to get a bit bitter or discolored. The quality goes down and we stop. But we could probably give it a third cut. I don't know that we will. We have other things we want to put in here. The cut yield goes down a little each time, but very high value. If you think of what you pay for baby greens in the store, think about 140 pounds coming out of this bed. That's in 5 weeks. We seeded this 5 weeks ago, and it'll be out of here, and we'll put something else in. So, and over here we have carrots.
Oh.
And these are going to be baby carrots. It's a pretty tight stand of carrots. But you know, when we actually are able to pull one out at some point, yesterday I tried, but broke off. Yeah, here. See if I can get one out whole somewhere. It's really fun to see. It's hard, but there, you can see right there. Snap the bottom of it off. But in about a week we'll have baby carrots. In 2 or 3 weeks we'll have full-size carrots, and we will have a lot.
Nice.
Here. Yeah. And this is the vegetable garden writ large. And vegetable gardens have always been very diverse, very high input, right? A lot of time, a lot of attention, a lot of labor, a lot of fertility, a lot of love, and they provide a lot of nutrition for the household. It's not where you grow your carbs, it's not necessarily where you grow your protein, but you grow your vitamins and minerals in the vegetable garden. And so we also like to grow good bugs and beneficial relationships with wildlife, and not grow the bad bugs. So growing this sort of diversity and interplanting things like this and switching things up and rotating, that all helps to keep the bad bugs at bay, keep them a little baffled, disoriented, and then we let things go to flower that other people necessarily wouldn't, like dill and cilantro. We don't have any right now, but those are flowers that we let, when we're done harvesting the herb, we'll let it go and let it flower because the good bugs love it. So bugs will come in that parasitize or predate upon bad bugs.
You actually purposely keep the good insects around so that they take care of the bad insects, and that's another way that you can use less chemicals.
Absolutely, and that is another reason for not using harmful chemicals. It's not just the human health, it's also the health of the good bugs. If we get rid of our good bugs, we're absolutely dependent on those chemicals to keep the bad bugs at bay. If we can keep our good bug population around, we have allies.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. So do you mind showing us a few more things that you have in this high tunnel?
Sure, so this one has been cropped a lot differently. We've got vertical trellises, which will eventually be supporting our cucumbers. And for our late season cucumbers, we can grow something before them. So we're growing peas. So peas are climbing that trellis. And here we have our kale. So if you look down here, you know, this is just about ready for its first harvest. We've had a lot of rabbits in here. We've been sort of rebuilding our sidewalls and having to deal with rabbits. So a lot of things have been set back, but they're coming along. These kale plants go in, they're the first plants to go in and the last to come out. And we will get 8 to 9 months of kale production out of a high tunnel. And by the end of the season, those are about this big. In fact, they've gotten as high as a person. They look like palm trees, big tuft on the top. And sometimes we even have to trellis them. And while we're waiting for these things to grow, we often are able to sneak little crops in the middle. Like I said, every square foot of our farm is pretty precious, but especially the high tunnels. That's our most valuable resource. So if you look down here, you can see where we grow very short season crops between other things while we're waiting for them to size up. So get right on down close to the ground and get this exciting close-up of the radish coming out. So these are some of our first radishes of the season, and they are ready. And the whole radish stand here will come out just as the kale plants and the pea plants get so big that they wouldn't be able to grow. So that's the way I've used it.
So we're back out in the field now, and Matt, it looks like you have nylons over your plants. What's going on out here?
Yeah, well, it kind of is nylons. For all I know, it's the same material. These are anti-insect nets, and they are not the most attractive thing to see in the field. It's much prettier when you can see all the crops, you know, like we do in the tunnels. But it serves a very important role of excluding insects we don't want in there, so we don't have to use chemicals. And these are reusable nets, so it is plastic. I don't love using plastic in the field, but we can use these for 2 to 3 years before they degrade. And they're very thin nets, so they bunch up and roll up real tight and small.
So you're using these to keep bugs off of your plants?
Yep, and primarily we're worried about flea beetles, aphids, something called a leafhopper that transmits a disease, and cabbage worm moths.
So we're back inside another high tunnel, and here you've got this cloth over the plants. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so this is our tomato high tunnel, and we put them in early, so we're worried about some of these cool temperatures at night. So this can be used for excluding bugs, but it's also used for containing heat and keeping plants warm and keeping the frost off. So this is also called a frost blanket or row cover versus a net.
Just like we like to be snuggled up at night, you like to put your blankets over your tomato plants.
Exactly, we tuck our plants in for the evening. So when we pull this aside, we're standing on there, you can see some of our tomatoes that have been planted. Now these tomatoes start out small, and actually we pinch the blossoms off when we put them in because we want them to attend to growing roots right now, not fruits. And they will grow really big, and they will be pruned and trellised very intensively. So these lines that you see hanging from the 2 bars will be used to trellis the plants. So as they grow, we'll split them into 2 vines, and then we will remove anything that is not those 2 vines. And we'll train those 2 vines up to these bars up top and get tremendous amounts of tomatoes off of these rows.
And when you say trellis the plants, you mean help them grow straight so they don't fall over and flop onto the ground.
We train them up the line, growing up the line, and that's a form of trellising. Yep. And we'll get a lot of fruit production. We'll make sure that there's adequate ventilation and airflow around the plants by pruning them like that. We'll prune all the leaves up from the soil to make sure that there's no backsplash or soil-borne diseases getting up on the leaves. And by the end of the summer, these things will go right up to those trellis supports and past them and just start flopping. And at a certain point, to be honest, we just kind of lose control of them, and that's the beginning of the end. You know, we got to start getting up on ladders to get the last few harvests. I will also say you can see more interplanting here. These are beets that will grow happily alongside the tomatoes and be harvested by the time that the tomatoes are so big that they're taking up all the light.
You guys do a really great job of maximizing your space in here.
Yep, and